Hello, students. Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. I got to use the Chrome only. I don't know what happened with Firefox today again. Uh, okay, let's move on. Let me share the screen. Entire. And I will switch to Firefox where we have the Google Classroom open for BDA. Yeah, I was checking the submissions, right? So you must have received few emails if you have not done, submission. So left for this Thursday, we are gonna have AIM. You guys will have to be ready to be able to run word count on any of the okay, this Thursday by 3:30. Make sure you guys have some solution for running Hadoop Java program. Okay. We may also have any other solution of word count, maybe with MongoDB and all. Okay, if you are not able to make it with Hadoop and Java. Okay, fine. So that's left the day. NewSQL is what is left from previous lecture. Already know SQL, right? Structure query language. Then we got introduced to NoSQL. What is the full form of NoSQL? What is the full form of NoSQL? Only SQL. Correct. That means, SQL is there, but in the world, there are, various kinds of data sources, and hence will work, but we'll have to also bring in some new innovative way of handling data. That's when, NoSQL, the term was coined, right? Not only SQL. Correct. And then we also now have something called NewSQL. Actually, is a lot of theoretical. There are a lot of less practical solutions available in NewSQL, but we should at least have theoretical idea of what is NewSQL. So let me move on to that slide now. SQL, NoSQL, and NewSQL. Right, data handling of various types. Of course, we understand the SQL, we understand NoSQL, right? And that's when we also talked about something called BASC base, where we learned basically available, soft state, eventual consistent. This is one of the weaker, strong and weaker form of consistency. We also heard about CAP theorem, consistency, availability, and partition tolerance, right? So this is where you need to now focus about NoSQL categories. They are primarily four: document-oriented, columnar databases, key-value data stores, and graph-based. Okay, so if we are talking about examples, the implementation, and MongoDB, CouchDB are document-oriented databases. All of these support NoSQL, and all of these are meant to take or deal with NoSQL, okay, category. But they also have their architecture different. So that's when they are categorized as you see on your screen. So MongoDB has document as the fundamental source of data, okay, or unit, you may say. The way HBase, Cassandra, and Hypertable, they're actually considering column as their unit for data storage, and processing. So their architecture is around column. Okay. I also know something called Vertica by HP from year 2011. And the name Vertica, it's a suggests that there may be something like vertical. So in the previous class, I actually let you learn about row measure versus column measure. I mean, you already know it from semester one. In C programming, arrays are row measure, right? But know that in R programming language, you have a choice when you create vector or when you create matrix. You have a choice whether you want to either store row wise or column wise, whatever data you are supporting. But that is also for visualization. I mean, interpretation purpose. Internal storage, be it row wise or column wise, that's a separate story. But we understand row measure versus column measure, right? Memory architecture, row measure versus column measure. So this HBase, Cassandra, and Hypertable, they are columnar databases, meaning they store data in columnar sequences. That means for analytics, when you really focus on column, all the data units will be next to each other than jumping from one place to another place, or maybe in the similar bucket or partition. So is the highest bottom line, right? Disk IO takes a lot of time. That's when we have the architecture of primary memory as well as caching mechanism and all. So you guys are aware of it. So to reduce disk IO, this is what database management systems might have thought, which is particularly if it is not ACID property required like transaction oriented systems. If it is NoSQL specific, then and if it is meant to do analytics on certain columns, then why not to have all the data of a given column next to each other in the memory, so that you don't really need to do head movement or block movements, jump of blocks, whatever you might think of. That's when HBase, Cassandra, Hypertable, and as I said, HP Vertica, they are all columnar-based databases. So furthermore, we have key value data store. Actually, key value is bottom line for a lot of these vendors. Okay, so it's not like only DynamoDB, React, Redis, and Membase do use key value. We know already, right? MongoDB also has key value concept. So key value is there in this era, the distributed computing as well as cloud and IoT and all. Key value is the primary thing. But on top of that, MongoDB, CouchDB, they have documents as primary. React, Redis, and decisions made with key value pairs only. Okay, fine. So the graph, social media and cities and all these connections and all the networks of any kind can be represented by graph. We know that, right? So analysis of such graph-based data can be better done in Neo4j infinite graph kind of systems, because they are that their fundamental data structure itself is graph. Okay, so no, as I said, there are 150 plus more vendors. So examples can be any. You guys keep seeing what is latest out there, but NoSQL categories have to be understood, and you need to know few examples of database management systems or vendors following the approach of these categories, right? So okay, as I said, it's more like a prototype to combine advantage of both examples, SQL plus NoSQL. I mean, NewSQL is is prototype to bring goodness of SQL as well as NoSQL. So to understand what NewSQL theory might be, we will have to first understand pros and cons of SQL as well as NoSQL. So if you are seeing on the screen the tabular display, on the left it shows plus of SQL, on the right it shows plus of NoSQL. So it's not versus, it's not comparison. You understand it, right? So SQL, it supports ACID property. I mean, transaction oriented, right? Transaction has to have ACID, atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability, right? So that's one thing. which is the strong or strength of SQL. And the other thing is the SQL interface itself. I mean, the structured query language which lets you fetch data or do perform CRUD operations. So what are the strengths of SQL? Then the answer is it supports ACID property, and the other one is SQL interface, the SQL query language itself. Okay. Then if we talk about what is or what are the strengths of NoSQL, then it's about horizontal scaling. Okay, it's about horizontal scaling. The supercomputer or the vertical scaling will have a limit on architecture and implementation, right? So that's when and it will be budgetary troublesome, right? So that's when the horizontal scaling, like cluster, cloud, and all, that's when NoSQL. So distributed computing is the heart of NoSQL. Okay, storage as well as computing. Fine. So horizontal scaling is the strength of NoSQL. It lets you scale out. Okay. And then the second one is flexible schema. So NoSQL, it lets you have schema-less or semi-schema structured databases stored into the data sources or data stores. Okay, so flexible schema, I mean, that's one strength of NoSQL versus in original, RDBMS SQL, we have very much like a rigid or fixed schema. So we understand plus of SQL, we understand plus of NoSQL. Now, can we bring in something new which actually combines advantages of both SQL as well as NoSQL? If so, that's named as NewSQL. Okay, so NewSQL should be actually supporting ACID property. Okay, so that's when we are actually after consistency, because we cannot just compromise consistency. Though we have this eventual consistency, like consistency levels to attain, but we still want to have 100%. So that's when how to make this happen. I mean, that's a next thing. But for now, you just be aware of the theoretical part, which is NewSQL should support ACID. That means consistency is a priority, okay, specifically. And then NewSQL should also have a SQL interface. Now, SQL interface is also there in NoSQL, right? Many of the NoSQL, they have SQL interfaces. So that's okay. But the ACID, I mean, the consistency part is definitely, be there in NewSQL. NewSQL support horizontal scaling like cluster and all, scale out? Then the answer is yes. Should it also, till when possible, provide flexibility with the schema? And the answer is yes. So NewSQL is a prototype, as I just mentioned, and there are a few you might explore as named, like VaultDB, Clustrix, Translatis. The name suggests that they are meant, they are built around some metrics or lattice, right, or in-memory databases. Yep. So do explore this. Okay. Okay. So that was it from my side about SQL, NoSQL, and NewSQL. Okay. You can always have hundreds of slides from various sources on the web, but you guys should know what is primary concern here in SQL, NoSQL, and NewSQL. Okay. All right. So I'll close it. Okay. So we talked about NewSQL and comparisons. Okay. Then next we'll talk about a simple topic here called data at rest versus data in motion. You might have heard this term. If you haven't, let's just understand these terms. Okay, data at rest, R-E-S-T, rest. Okay, versus data in motion. So this is very much simple English, like whether the data is moving or not, right? So if data is moving, then you say data is in motion, right? Versus if the data is steady, you say data at rest. Now, these terms are primarily, when you talk about data streams, uh, I repeat, when you talk about data streams, data packets, all those things, sensors, sending data. So specifically the stream and packets, as I mentioned, right, they fall under the data in motion category, while data at rest is primarily for, your archived set of data. Uh, I already mentioned the example for, in banking sectors, 5 years and prior, statements. Very rarely people will need to have, but still, for the government closes, bank need to have all the old data also. So that type of data will be, archived, will be kept in a separate mechanism in which, there will be less IO or interaction. It is just there for, being their sake. That's when we say data at rest. Okay. So the techniques what we are learning, like for analytics, they have to be good with data at rest as well as data in motion, right? Many times you will not have a choice, like stream analytics, right? Data will always be in motion. You don't have a choice. You cannot say I will store the complete stream and then only I will, analyze. That may not be possible or feasible. We'll talk about them, the topics further about, data in motion and all. But just know these two separate terms and their differences. Okay. Another is types of cloud. So it is primarily with cloud computing. Very before people used to say, public cloud and private cloud, right? So private cloud is very much like you have your own infrastructure, okay, and you guys do set up some or other software like Hadoop, and you bring up cluster, as we have already done in labs of DDU, uh, like lab 5 of computer engineering, lab 2, lab 3, lab 8. I mean, we were successfully able to do this. That is an example of a private cloud. Okay. But then public cloud, now it is also having a different name. But then public cloud is very much like you take advantage of some, cloud infrastructure from the giants like Amazon, Google, and all, right? So that's very much like a public cloud. Though the name is misleading, that's when, there is another name, maybe enterprise cloud. Okay, they might have chosen, because it's not truly public. Okay, so I mean, that's when private versus public is not the proper word sequence. But then you just understand private cloud, then enterprise cloud, or you may say public, like, or non-private cloud. I don't know. You find out the word now what is there in the market. But there's third term called hybrid cloud. So you guys understand hybrid cloud means you will choose to have things in your control, but you will still have some infrastructure from the cloud companies. Okay, so that's when you have something called hybrid cloud also. Okay, so explore those terms with respect to cloud computing. Okay, fine. So I don't think I have created a slide for that. I mean, it's just few terms I wanted to throw. So it's there as one of the topic. Okay, fine. So with that, we'll move on to some new application. Okay, of big data and analytics. We've been talking about multiple applications, right? And we will see some solutions. And we are also working on the infrastructure, right? For example, we have already explored how to get connected to IBM as well as Oracle Cloud, Oracle as well as Google Cloud, right? So everything will go in parallel. I mean, the infrastructure, expanding more number of applications, and improving our understanding where all we can apply data analytics, right? And as well as we'll also try to solve with certain tools whatever is feasible and possible. Okay, so this week in the lab we are going to do MapReduce programming, so be prepared for that. I would cover the topic also maybe in the lab itself, if not in the lecture. So be prepared for that. Okay. But as you know, not only the word count, but word count based, the, what was that? Cloud, what was that? What was the name of that banner which is having, frequency based words in an image graphics? What is it named? World word cloud, yes, word cloud, yes. So word count versus word cloud. Okay, so sometime, slip of tongue is possible, but be aware, or be known to the fact that word count, that is, the frequency of words we will count using some or other frameworks. But then based on that, we can also create some image, and the name is word cloud, right? There may be any fancy name also, I'm not aware, but word cloud, that is correct. The way, we talked about outsourcing, then we talk about crowdsource, uh, and we also, uh, talked about cloud sourcing. So, there are terms which look similar, but they have special purpose. So be known to these terms and do utilize them as much as possible in your interview or however, wherever. Okay, fine. So we'll move on. So we are now adding one more application to our known application list for big data and analytics, and that is the clickstream. Now, many of you might know the word clickstream. Those who don't, let's just understand. Okay, so nowadays, and I would actually, being English enthusiast, I would actually mention that this is not a perfect word or the name, but then it was chosen, so now we all know that it's clickstream. Okay, but then why would I say it is not perfectly named? The reason we'll understand as we learn. Okay, so users now, either via mouse or keyboard or touch screen or even via voice commands, they interact to applications, right, of devices for various services. Yes or no, right? So once upon a time there used to be keyboard and mouse only, so we were just clicking, but it's not like when you click using mouse it's called click. Even when you touch is a type of click only, right? So that's when I say that click may not be a perfect term here, but we have to understand what does it really mean. Is and I use Alexa, Siri, and all, right, Cortana and all. So voice commands. I mean, these all the interaction, right? It actually generates streams of data for the companies, whoever are after it or following, right? Cookies, like privacy concerns, and you accept cookies and all, right? That makes sure that all of your interaction is some or other way, till when genuinely possible, is streamed to the source of the website. And then the websites, the companies will be able to do some kind of data analytics for your betterment, or providing better service, right? So security is definitely a concern, as we have already described in the past, right? But we understand clickstream data analytics, that's one of the application of big data and analytics, right? The reason being, a hell lot of uses by audiences worldwide, right, of various age. Even kids nowadays, or even grown-ups, elderly, they are having their smartphone, and we see them spending a lot of time uh, with web. So that's when the client's applications can have a positive way of watching the same and understand users' behavior for good, right? So as you know, we have to be doing this analytics for good, uh, for in a positive way. Okay, so in general, famously known as clickstream, it let companies do background work and provide user with choices of his or her interest. In a way, this has to be win-win situation. Yes, right. For the companies, they get profit, and the customer, he or she gets what he needs, without hassle, right? So that should be a win-win situation, and privacy has to be, security has to be utmost of importance. Okay, so the software must be made such a way that it gives utmost importance to users' privacy and security. So clickstream, fine. I hope we understand the importance of clickstream data analytics, and how will you do that? That's the next thing to think on. Okay, so you might be running various services behind the scene on your site, like the JavaScript and Ajax and all, right? So whenever any requests come, what data do you just pass on form to the form or web page to the server? That's mainly on on the shoulders of the developers, right? So they actually not only carry the minimum data, but they also carry a few more things which actually prone to the clickstream data analytics. Fine. So once you have data on your server, I mean, in your cloud storage, wherever, then the next thing will be the analytics algorithms. Now, I'll tell you, actually, I've been with IBM Watson Studio. Okay. Yeah. The IBM, I mean, most cloud companies, they have implemented n number of algorithms. So nowadays, even implementing algorithms is secondary. I mean, you just choose now, because all these giants, most of them have already implemented n number of analytical algorithm, machine learning algorithm. So it's good to learn. We have to learn. We have to make the base. But even the implementation is readily available. Okay, most of these giants have already invested in that. Fine. So of course there'll be still a lot of improvement, as well as new things, new challenges, right? But yeah. So to do clickstream data analytics, I mean, to train model and all, there are a lot of algorithms ready available with cloud platform. Okay, so you may explore this on your interest. That was clickstream data analytics as an application of big data analytics. Okay. All right. So we have few more programming, topics ahead. The reason being, in the next coming lab, you will need some programming part, right, with Hadoop and Java. So to install Hadoop, have your, HDFS as well as Yarn up and running. Okay. So before I move on to Mapper and Reducer API, this is one simple topic here. I have already described, there is version 1 and version 2, right? It's also sometimes called Hadoop 1 and Hadoop 2. Maybe Ma'am will also cover this topic, but just because I'm going to touch programming part here, I would just tell you that in Hadoop 1, there used to be, the master with processing named as job tracker, which now is named as resource manager. And, the task tracker is now named as node manager. There is one difference, at least name wise, but another difference is, what you see on your screen by Geeks4Geeks. I normally avoid, looking at to this, but it's just there. So I thought it's okay to, share with you guys the third-party forum you might definitely use. Okay. But then Hadoop 1, there was only HDFS and MapReduce. MapReduce itself was doing resource management also, while in Hadoop 2, we have HDFS, and there is something called Yarn in between, which is primarily, doing resource management. So this is division of work, basically, okay, to make some more simplicity, fine, and to distribute the work, okay. So MapReduce and other types of jobs, I mean, but not resource management completely. So why I just took that up, because you guys will also want to find out this. We'll talk about this, why I have opened this one. Okay. Okay, so version 1 and version 2, what I just mentioned, right? So now we are taking up this particular topic, which is called Mapper and Reducer API. So when we say API, I mean, we understand, some library, right? So you might go open this document, which is this. I simply, typed in for some reference. Okay. So mapper and reducer API. Mapper is a class, okay, which will be doing the job for mapping. So we know the input will be key value pair and output will be key value pair, right? And there are, methods in it, like cleanup method, map method, run method, and setup method. So far, I think we were only we were aware of only map map as a function, right? Which you will have in your word count program. But then know that, as like, let's say servlet lifecycle or any other, programming, let's say C program starts with main and ends with, the exit or when main ends. So basically that way in this Hadoop also, this mapper class has a life cycle, and there are more functions just than map. The other functions are, cleanup, setup, and RU and run. So as you might, see, maybe it is not completely visible for now. Let me just, but you can definitely go to the website itself and talk about this. So it's very much, because it's a sales cycle, right? So that has to be, a few more things. So as you see, cleanup, it is called once at the end of the task. Then setup, it is called once at the beginning of the task. Okay, and run is for expert, right? Expert users can override this method for more complex control over the execution of the mapper. So, and map is the actual, which actually will have the logic of, mapping. It is called once for each key value pair. So this is important. It is called once for each key value pair in the input split. Okay, this input split is very much like your partition, what you're talking about, the data set. Okay, so know that map function is called actually once for each key value pair in input split. So as I already mentioned, the map function, the code, the binary, the object code will be one, but it will be executed multiple times, maybe in parallel too. That's when I say the instances of map will be many. Okay, so but then setup, run, and cleanup, etc., they are called, as we have noted. Okay, so it's very much like, constructor and destructor also, we feel like, yes or no? So, and you have to go with few terms like task. See, this is called once per task. Okay, so when you submit the job to MapReduce framework, that's a task. Okay, that's a task. So so that way, setup is called only once, as well as cleanup is also called only once. Setup at the beginning, cleanup at the end. So it is very similar to, constructor and destructor. So few things which you might want to do beginning of the task only one time, maybe some initializations, etc. You may do it in setup method, versus few things you might want to, clean up or release resources, etc. You might do in cleanup method. Okay. So be aware, not only map is the method, there are actually a few more, which is what you see on your screen. Okay, so that's mapper life cycle, and that way we also have the reducer life cycle. So the class named reducer, okay, has these many methods, very similar to what we have seen in mapper, like, setup, run, and cleanup. Okay, so do explore this. Of course, the argument will vary, because here is reducer versus the class package and all belonging to reducer, versus the mapper has, map package and all, right? Mapper package, right? So check this out. You must remember this. Here, this is the reduce function. What is the input to reduce function? It is the key and value pair. No, it is a key and values. I keep saying this. This is, a treble, and this is because combiner might have, brought into multiple information as well as those all key value pairs. So key will be common for the given partition, but values will be many, be it 111 or be it 579, however, but then there'll be many values in the partition or the split, right? That's when it's iterable, and you know what is Java iterable, right? I mean, you must have used it for iterating in a for loop like for each and all. So be aware, the map takes key and value only as input, while reduce takes key and values, which is nothing but an iterable. So the set of values, not single. Okay, but it is actually accessed via single variable. So it is an iterable or iterable, however you may pronounce. Okay, fine. So with that, I believe you know what is map and reduce. Okay, a little bit more than before, right? Do refer whatever links I might have provided. Okay, so maybe you do refer it from here. Okay. Oh, one more thing. So the one which we have already talked is actually the version 2. Okay, the latest, the current. But then there used to be version 1 also, as we have already seen version 1 Hadoop and version 2 Hadoop, right? So version 1 Hadoop, actually that library is still there in the sources, and those packages are actually termed MAP RDD, MapRead, versus the version 2 are actually termed map reduce. So you might actually click here like map reduce and map read. So these are two. So these are open here. I would just go through them. Yeah. So see this MAP RED. Whenever you see this shorten, it's actually version 1. Okay, Hadoop version 1. So there you will see the differences. At that time, Yarn was not in market. Okay, so be aware this is version 1 of Hadoop. Okay, and check more detailing, learn about it. But it's still there. I mean, it's still there as part of the package and the library. Okay, if someone wants to use version 1 APIs, they can use. And MAP RED is actually version 1. So what is the difference? At least the first difference what you might see is version 1, the map and reduce, they were interfaces. Okay, they were interfaces. I repeat, in version 1, map and reduce were interfaces. Okay, interface, Java interface, right? Versus version 2, they are class. Okay, and when I say class, they are actually abstract class. We'll talk about it. Maybe we find out somewhere down. Okay, but they are abstract class. Okay, so this is one difference, version 1 and version 2. Version 1, they were interfaces. Version 2, they are abstract class. Now, those who are into Java, they might know the movement, interface versus abstract class. Should you have interfaces or should you have abstract class? There are differences, and there are, that's when you might read from one or other Java tutorials website. Okay, so I have kept this third-party site open for you just so that you can explore. But I would still advise you to refer official documentation on abstract class and interfaces and find out yourself the benefits of each, right? So those who just know that interface supports multiple inheritance in Java, actually, this particular topic is debatable. Or multiple inheritance is a different thing. It's not like interfaces let you establish multiple interface supports multiple inheritance. No, interface let you structure multiple inheritance. Okay, it just let you categorize or hierarchy, let you create hierarchies. Okay, but that's not true inheritance. Inheritance is actually about properties have to be inherited, and we know interfaces do not inherit properties. So please don't completely go with whatever is written. How to understand, that's the next thing. You have to be focused. Okay, But be aware what are the plus about abstract classes. And nowadays, even in Java 8 plus, interfaces are also a little bit more powerful. So explore those things. That will definitely take you forward if you are in Java technology. Okay. For example, interface can have default and static methods too. Okay. And there are a lot many more things. I mean, interface and so you have to follow Java. Okay. Last year, Java finished 25 years, and there was a movement, series of lectures and webinars and all. And now they have this, I think, 6 months or quarter, I forgot. They have released, right? So you do follow, Java latest from, possibly from LinkedIn or any other sources. Okay. But be those who are into Java technologies know that you have to learn a lot if you have not already explored the latest one. Okay, please follow that. Okay, so my concern here was the MapReduce API, right, with Hadoop. So as I mentioned, there are older and newer version, and there are differences. And one of the architecture difference, which is interface versus abstract class, etc. So do go in depth, those who are hard programmers. Okay, fine. So this is, I know, just the beginning, but I'm giving you at least something to start with. The Hadoop library. Okay, fine. So that was MapReduce API. Any questions? At least, I mean, did that make some sense? What we talked, versions, then some API. So programming is not going away. Okay, no matter what, programming is not going away. I remember one of my friend's friend. He got 10 interviews in 2 weeks from software giants, and he said programming is not going away. No matter how good are you with architect and design and all, you still have to be able to code. Okay, so please make sure you don't just talk. Okay, make sure you do also coding, because you are just fresher, right? Okay, anything else? Any question, anybody? Are we connected? Okay, all right. So we are connected, that is good, and no questions, that is bad. Okay, fine. We'll move on to the next topic. So you guys know, right? This Java docs can be created automatically. Learn about it if you don't know. Okay, this Java docs can be created automatically. Okay, fine. I mean, of course, there has to be something like supporting data, but then the whole doc, the HTML, or that will be created automatically. So if you don't know, explore Java docs. Okay, how to create. It's very much like annotations you can have in your Java source code while you are developing. Then you run some command or menu items which will generate the Java documents automatically for you. Okay, fine. So we'll move on to the next topic. Oh yeah, so I was checking the roll numbers, right? So I have 151 enrolled student, right? So that means all of you are here. But then this Raj Patel, please rename your display name so that I have you in your sequence, like 102 or so. He's, yeah. Oh, come on, 103 Raj Patel. Okay, God knows. 102 and 103, please make sure you update so that I know if someone is missing here. Do we have 102 or 103 in the class today? 102, 103. Oh my goodness. Okay, if you know him or her, let them know to join the class and update the display name correctly. Okay. Fine. So because next week gonna be exam, you all guys have to be here. Okay. And I know at that time all of you will be here. Okay, literally speaking. So guys, who you are seeing this count here, right? See, during the exam, the count will be, all of you will be here. Does it make sense? I mean, you guys care for exam, but not for learning. Okay, I will close that. We'll move on to next topic, which is the big data and data modeling. Okay, so that's a small topic here. Of course, it is however depth you can achieve here, a lot to achieve actually. But I will just introduce you to the term to start. We're gonna do things in this line. Okay. So the topic big data and data modeling. Okay. So when you really want to handle big data, or you say provide big data solutions, you will have to do data modeling. Okay, that's nothing but very much like for programming we think of data structures, right? For proven performance, you will always need in-depth data structure establishment, right? So the same way for proven big data solutions, you will need based possible data models. So a lot of maths and a lot of algorithmic things you can learn and explore. So I just kind of wrote this one simple document here just so that you know what is data modeling. How to do, as I said, hashing we know, but how to do hashing, I mean, you have to really deep dive, right? That way, data modeling is the theoretical part here. So there's a concept called schema on read and schema on write. I mean, schema on write I have not heard, but you might think, right? Schema on write. I mean, it's possible, but primarily the topic is schema on read. So does this make sense? I mean, schema on read. I mean, what is it trying to tell you? Schema on read. Okay, what do you think? What it is trying to tell you? So we know we are after flexible schema, right? Even new SQL, it says a flexible schema better, right? That's because the requirements are changing, the sources are changing, and I mean a lot of stuff dynamic, right? So schema better be flexible. So what do you think? I mean, what this schema on read may be? Any guess? I mean, you should try, because even in interview, few terms will be thrown to you, and the interviewer will expect that you at least can, think of something or try to connect something based on your previous knowledge. Okay, so guys, do this exercise as and when possible. Okay, anything which is thrown to you, you should be able to connect something, which actually shows that you are thoughtful. Okay, anybody? Schema on read. I already have created the background to answer. Okay, so this is what it is. We know we are expecting schema-less storage or flexible schema storage. That means while you write or while you dump the data, you really don't have any schema. You just dump the data. So whenever the data is coming in, you say, let it be there, let it be there. Okay, let's just store it. However that is, let's just store it. Okay, so that's your writing. Okay, but then why would you not care while writing, or let me say, why would you show less care while writing? Because you have this attitude, or you have this strategy saying, I will write it without much technical details, right? But then when I read, I would actually read smart. I would not read everything. I would read with some smartness. Actually, it's possible you can have some schema while you are trying to read. Okay, so the rules or the actions what you are doing while reading, that's actually is termed as enforcing some schema. That's when you can say that schema on read. So you will store the raw data, but you will apply schema as and when based on the purpose of reading. So this is one more interesting thing. For the same data source or data set, you can have 3 or 5 or n number of different schema. So based on your purpose, you can enforce schema while you are reading. Okay, so it's very much like you have the data, the raw data, and if you want to read it in 0 and 1s format, go ahead and read it in 0 and 1 format. That's your schema on read for purpose 1. If you are interested in reading, let's say decimal wise, I'm just giving the example, okay, mathematical though. But if you want to read the data in decimal, you read it as a decimal, knowing how zeros and ones binary to decimal conversion happens, right? If you want to read the data in hexadecimal, you read it in hexadecimal. The source is same, but based on your purpose, you are enforcing some kind of logic or conversion. That's what is called schema on read. So the benefit of this is based on, different purposes. You can have your own method of reading it. So this is a concept only, schema on read, how to make it happen. That's the next thing, right? So this actually opens up vast possibilities dealing with futuristic requirements. Okay, as and when any requirement is upfront, today or tomorrow, you will actually have a mechanism to read data accordingly and satisfy the requirement of that particular challenge. Okay, so this is also sometimes referred to as fully fidelity of data. Be known to this term fidelity. Okay, actually there is a company which actually provides the pay stub and 401k benefit and all. Like your salary will be done by all this by this company. It's a solution provider, Fidelity. Is that I remember correct? Yeah, it's correct. It's Fidelity. Okay. So organizations will be having accounts with Fidelity, and then the employees will get their paychecks and all via this Fidelity accounts. So yeah, that's in US and outside US also. Okay, Fidelity. Anyways, the meaning of fidelity you have to be after. That's what this is named here. So schema on read is sometimes also referred as full fidelity of data. That means you have full freedom for casting your own schema while you read based on your current needs. Right. The same data set can be utilized by various teams for different applications. Hadoop provides a data store to accumulate big data with distributed storage. HDFS is one example of data store, right? And still it plays a vital role about making appropriate selection for available options. So you actually have so many options, okay? Even with HDFS, how do you want to store? Like you can change the, split type, you can change the storage type blocks, etc. You can actually, choose to store in a sequential format, record columnar format, or like compression, you want to store it as a compressed with codecs applied. So there are a lot of more things connected with Hadoop and termed as Hadoop ecosystem, what we know, right? The metadata handling can be, relational. You can even store data into Hadoop, but metadata into some, third-party RDBMS database. That is also possible, and I think we will have some example on this. Okay, I forgot, but we will store the schema into, I think, PostgreSQL database also, because it's relational, if you remember PostgreSQL. Okay, but then the actual data will be still in Hadoop HDFS, which is the raw part, like key values like HBase and basic files and directory structure itself. So do read this. These are on my own understanding, and I'm sure that they are all correct to my knowledge. So file type, they include plain text, sequential, record columnar, container format. And container format, actually they have a few more examples. Okay, like remember lab 1 when I asked you to, explore a lot of file formats. So a few more things will come up. Sequential file is mostly used to combine very small files into a single file with markers. Okay, and marker indicates, block boundaries, and markers help to split and allocate blocks appropriately. Hadoop is optimized for big size data files. So if you're thinking like, okay, I will use Hadoop and my data size will be in MBs and I'm not getting any performance, there is a reason behind it, because the processes to handle big data actually will have overhead on top of your low set of data, right? So don't expect high performance with less number of data set. I mean, the small size of data set. No, Hadoop performs better only if the data is big in size. So, and there is a reason, is architect accordingly, okay, to meet that need. So as Hadoop is optimized for big size data files, one of the example is having less number of files mean less metadata entries in memory to handle by name node. Okay, I would skip this one now. You read it. Okay, serialization. Okay, what is serialization? So you might have heard about this word, serialization, and another like deserialization, right? So do read that. We'll have some empirical results on the same serialization as well as deserializable. Okay. Yeah, I was talking to you, right? Containers. So Apache Avro is one of the example of container. Okay, do read about it. Avro is also a file format as mentioned in the past. There's another RC file. Okay, we'll talk about it. RC file. So XML JSON you already are aware, but do explore Snappy, Parquet, okay, tools. But these all are actually there to let you model the data. That's what the bottom line. Okay. So that's what data modeling is all about. You'll have to choose certain stuff as per your need, even the storage, formats, etc., the processing tools and all. That's when you'll thrive with big data solutions. So there was a general term, big data and data model. Simply, if I say, if you are after graph-based storage and all, don't go for sequential file. Of course, you should opt for some graph-based tools, which are Neo4j, for example. Okay. All right. So we have 6 minutes to go, and of course, I have to add one more topic here, which is the zipping part. Zip archive. No archive. Yeah, this is I just talked, right? Compression and archival, right? If you choose to store data in compressed or archived form, this is what you might want to do, right? Let me just. Okay, so what is it? I mean, so guys, anybody is aware of the difference? I mean, difference, or why there are two terms? One is compression, another is archive. Let's see how good are you with general knowledge. Okay, anybody can tell me. There are two terms. Tell me something about them. You may speak if you may want to. How did it all start? I mean, any idea? General knowledge, I'm asking. We have 4 minutes, I think. Do we end up class at what time? We end up class at 3:20. Never mind then. Okay, I'll quickly finish it. It's a small thing. Okay, so one thing is see, remember, you have data and then you want to keep it previous year data. You want to just keep it somewhere. That's called archive. Okay, you may tie it up, make a bunch and put it on the shelf, right? Like Mariama Mukidev. Okay, so that's called archive. But then while you keep it in the shelf, I mean Mariama Mukta at that time, if you can actually make it smaller, it will help further, because next year you will again need space there. That's when the compression comes into picture. So nowadays compression is already there when you archive, but originally these two had separate algorithms. Okay, I mean separate purpose. but now no compression and archival talk together, right? So compression scenario one, as I just mentioned, right? You can actually use, Hadoop so and so jar to achieve compression and archival. Okay, so read through this. Fine, I might have created this for you. Hadoop archives. How do you achieve Hadoop archives? So HAR is the type of file for Hadoop archive. Like you have jar, right? Jar is also Java archive. So Hadoop archive is HAR. Fine, we'll stop here. Sorry about that. I mean, I will have to put an alarm to know when to stop. Every time I have to remember. Anyways, sorry about that. Come on. Yeah, you have a few minutes for the break. Fine, thank you very much. You may disconnect now.